The morning I found a bloodied warrior at the edge of my land, I had two choices: fetch my rifle or fetch water. That decision would bring 60 Lakota warriors thundering across Whispering Valley by sunrise, painted for war and riding with the fury of ancient winds. But when you're alone on the Wyoming frontier and humanity knocks at your door wearing the face of your enemy, what you choose reveals who you truly are. Before we ride into this remarkable tale of courage and forbidden compassion, tell me where you're tuning in from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn of 1876 had teeth. Cold winds swept down from the northern mountains, rattling the windows of my homestead like restless spirits demanding entry. 3 months had passed since Walter died, leaving me with 40 acres of stubborn soil and debts that grew faster than prairie grass. The good folks of Settlers Ridge had already decided my fate, too proud to accept charity, too foolish to sell, too young to manage alone. They whispered behind flour sacks at Hartley's store, wondered how long before I'd cave and marry Harlan Cross, who owned half the valley and wanted the rest. Some mornings, staring at bills I couldn't pay and fences I couldn't mend, I wondered. The same thing. That Tuesday started like any other. I rose before dawn to milk our last cow, buttermilk, and check the hen house. The earthquake 2 weeks back had damaged the well, and I'd been hauling water from Black Thunder Creek ever since. The morning air bit through my coat as I loaded empty buckets onto the wagon. Something felt different that day. The birds were too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I found him near the abandoned mill, half hidden in the tall grass where the creek bends. At first, I thought it was a deer brought down by wolves, but wolves don't leave their prey breathing. He lay on his side, one arm stretched toward the water he couldn't reach. Blood had pooled beneath him, dark and thick in the morning frost. His leather shirt was torn open, revealing a wound that ran from his ribs to his hip. Not a bullet wound, something worse, something deliberate. The war paint on his face had smeared, but I could still make out the symbols: Lakota, a scout, judging by his clothing. Young, maybe 25 winters. His horse was nowhere to be seen. Every instinct screamed danger. Just 3 months after, Little Bighorn. Finding a wounded Lakota on your property was like finding a lit fuse. The army had orders to shoot on sight. Settlers had orders to report any sighting immediately, but his lips were cracked, moving slightly as if praying to spirits I didn't understand. His hand twitched toward the creek, fingers grasping at air. I stood there, bucket in hand, watching him die by degrees. The rifle was back in my wagon. One shot would end it. Self-defense, they'd call it. No one would question a widow protecting herself. Instead, I knelt beside him and lifted his head. The water was cold against my fingers as I brought the cup to his lips. He didn't open his eyes, but he drank. Slow, painful swallows that seemed to cost him everything. When I tried to stand, his hand caught my wrist. Not threatening, desperate. His eyes opened then, deep brown, filled with pain and something else. Recognition? Gratitude? Warning? He spoke one word in English. Coming? The hair on my neck stood up. Coming? Who was coming? More warriors. The cavalry. I glanced around the empty valley, suddenly aware of how alone we were. I should have left him there. Should have ridden straight to town and reported it. That's what Walter would have done, what any sensible person would have done. Instead, I backed the wagon as close as I could and somehow managed to lift him onto the bed. He groaned once, but didn't cry out. Warriors didn't, I'd heard. They were trained from childhood to endure pain in silence. The ride back to the homestead felt endless. Every shadow could be an ambush. Every sound might be horses approaching. But the valley remained quiet, watching, waiting. Getting him inside proved harder than loading him. I half-carried, half-dragged him through the door and onto the kitchen floor. In the lamplight, I could see the damage more clearly. The wound, was deep, inflicted by a blade, not clean but torn. Someone had wanted him to suffer. I did what I could. Boiled water, cleaned the wound, packed it with spider webs and moss, like my grandmother had taught me. His fever burned hot enough to warm the whole room. Twice he tried to speak, words in Lakota that sounded urgent, but I couldn't understand. As afternoon faded to evening, I found myself studying his face. Younger than I'd first thought, with a scar across his jaw that had healed badly. His hands were calloused from weapons, but his fingers were long, almost delicate. An artist's hands, my mother would have said. I made broth from the last of yesterday's rabbit. When I tried to feed him, he turned away. Pride, even in dying, but hunger won. He let me spoon the liquid between his lips, his dark eyes never leaving my face. Night fell like a burial shroud. I lit every lantern I owned, as if light could keep away whatever was coming. The warrior, I couldn't keep thinking of him as just the warrior, stirred restlessly. His fever climbed higher. Around midnight, he began to speak. Not to me, but to someone only he could see. He reached out, grasping at memories or ghosts. Once he called a name, Maggie. Sister? Wife? I didn't know. I bathed his forehead with cool water, humming hymns my mother had sung when I was sick. Strange, singing church songs to a man whose people had their own gods. But music was music, and comfort was comfort. You're safe, I whispered, though I knew it was a lie. Neither of us was safe. Come morning, the world would find us, and there would be a reckoning. He seized my hand suddenly, his grip surprisingly strong. His eyes focused, truly seeing me for the first time. He spoke in English, voice raw. Why? Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. Because someone should, I said. He studied my face as if memorizing it. Then his eyes closed and his breathing evened out. The fever broke just before dawn, sweat beading on his skin like morning dew. I must have dozed in the chair beside him. I woke to silence, the kind that comes before storms. The birds had fled, even the wind held still. Then I heard it, the thunder of hooves, many hooves. The windows rattled with their approach. I grabbed Walter's rifle, knowing it was useless. What could one woman do against what was coming? But I stationed myself between the door and the wounded man, heart hammering against my ribs. The thunder stopped. Silence stretched like a held breath. Then a voice, deep and commanding, spoke from beyond my door. In English, accented but clear, "We come for our brother." I opened the door to face the sunrise, and 60 warriors spread across my valley like a vision from ancient days. Their horses stamped and snorted, painted with symbols I couldn't read. The men's faces were streaked, with red and black, feathers in their hair catching the morning light. At their center sat a man who could only be their chief, older than the others, with gray threading his braids and eyes that had seen too much. His horse, a massive black stallion, stood perfectly still. "I am Chief Joseph Crowfeather," he said. "You have my scout." My mouth went dry. The rifle shook in my hands. "He's wounded badly." "We know." The chief's eyes moved past me to the interior of the house. "May we see him?" It wasn't really a question. I stepped aside. 2 warriors, dismounted and entered. They moved past me as if I were furniture, kneeling beside their fallen brother. One checked his wound while the other spoke rapidly in Lakota. The scout's eyes fluttered open. He saw them and smiled, actually smiled. They spoke for several minutes, voices low and urgent. Then the scout pointed at me and said something that made both warriors turn. Their expressions shifted from suspicion to something else. Surprise, respect. One of them rose and walked to the door, speaking to the chief in rapid Lakota. Chief Crowfeather's eyebrows rose. He looked at me differently, now as if seeing me for the first time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Samuel Whitehawk says you saved his life, the chief said, that you risked your own safety to help him. Samuel. Finally, a name for the face I'd watched through the night. He was dying, I said simply. I gave him water, and shelter, and medicine, and protection. The chief dismounted, approaching slowly. Up close, I could see the weariness in his eyes, the weight of leadership in terrible times. This is not what we expected from a white woman. It's not what I expected from myself, I admitted. He studied me for a long moment. Then he did something that made every warrior straighten in surprise. He removed a necklace from around his neck, a string of bear claws and blue stones, and held it out to me. This marks you as a friend to the Lakota, he said. As long as you wear it, you are under our protection. My hands trembled as I took it. The claws were smooth with age, the stones polished by countless hands. It felt heavier than its weight, loaded with significance I couldn't fully grasp. I don't understand, I said. Samuel is more than a scout, Chief Crowfeather explained. He is my sister's son, my blood. You saved not just a warrior, but a piece of my heart. Behind us, the warriors were fashioning a travois from poles and blankets. They worked with quiet efficiency, preparing to move Samuel. Will he live? I asked. The chief's expression was grave. With proper care, perhaps. We have healers who know old medicines. He paused. You could have let him die, could have claimed a bounty. Why didn't you? I thought of Walter, of the proper way to do things, of what the town would say. Then I thought of that moment by the creek, when choosing humanity over fear had felt like the only real choice. My grandmother used to say that kindness is never wasted, I said, even when it's dangerous. Chief Crowfeather nodded slowly. Your grandmother was wise. He turned to his warriors and gave orders in Lakota. Most began to withdraw, but 4 remained. These men will stay nearby, he said. Hidden but watching. You helped us, now we protect you. That's not necessary. It is. His voice carried the weight of command. Word will spread. Your people will not understand what you've done. They will make you suffer for this kindness. He was right, of course. By noon, all of Settlers Ridge would know about the warriors at my homestead. By evening, I'd be branded a traitor, or worse. They loaded Samuel onto the travois with infinite care. As they prepared to leave, he gestured for them to bring him closer. His voice was stronger now, though still rough with pain. Thank you, he said in English. Then, in halting words, I will. Remember, always. I knelt beside the travois. Rest now. Heal. That's all the thanks I need. He reached out and touched the bear claw necklace now hanging around my neck. This means you are family, Lakota family. His eyes met mine. I will come back, Samuel. Chief Crowfeather's voice was gentle but firm. It was time. They left as they had come, in a thunder of hooves that shook the earth. I stood in my doorway, wearing the necklace of a people I'd been taught to fear, watching until the last warrior disappeared over the ridge. The silence that followed felt different, charged, expectant. I went inside and began to clean the bloodstains from my floor, knowing that my quiet life had ended the moment I chose water over weapons. Whatever came next, I would face it with the weight of bear claws against my chest and the memory of grateful eyes. By mid-morning, riders appeared on the town road. Sheriff Pike, Reverend Aldrich, and 3 others. Their faces were grim as they dismounted at my fence. Morning, Grace, the sheriff said, but his usual warmth was gone. We need to talk about your visitors. I straightened, my hand unconsciously touching the hidden necklace. What about them? 60 Lakota warriors, painted for war? Reverend Aldrich's voice dripped with accusation. Here, at your home. They came for their wounded scout, I said evenly. They left peacefully. Peacefully? One of the men spat in the dirt. Tell that to the settlers they've been raiding. That's enough, Tom, Sheriff Pike said, but his eyes remained troubled. Grace, you have to understand how this looks. You're alone out here, vulnerable. If they come back, they won't hurt me. The certainty in my voice made them all stare. Reverend Aldrich stepped forward, his face flushed with righteous anger. Have you lost your senses, woman? These are the same savages who massacred Custer, who've been terrorizing decent Christian folk for months. They're people, I said quietly, and one of them was dying. The silence stretched. Then Sheriff Pike sighed. Grace, I'm trying to protect you. The town's already talking. Harlan Cross is stirring folks up, saying you're a threat to everyone's safety. Of course he was. Harlan had been looking for an excuse to force me off my land since Walter died. This handed him the perfect opportunity. I've done nothing wrong, I said. Maybe not, the sheriff agreed. But right and wrong don't matter much when people are scared. You'd be safer in town. Maybe stay with Emma Hartley for a while. This is my home. Your home? Reverend Aldrich's voice rose. You've turned it into a sanctuary for heathens. What would your husband say? Something inside me snapped. My husband is dead. And if he were here, I hope he'd choose mercy over hatred. The words hung in the air. The men exchanged glances, the kind that said more than words ever could. The widow had lost her mind, gone native, become a danger to herself and others. Sheriff Pike tried once more. Grace, please, just for a few days. Let things calm down. I met his eyes steadily. No. They left reluctantly, but I knew they'd be back, and next time they wouldn't come asking. I spent the afternoon securing the homestead, checked the locks, counted ammunition I didn't know how to use, filled every container with water. When sunset painted the sky red, I sat on the porch with Walter's rifle across my lap, wondering if the warriors Chief Crowfeather had left behind were really out there. The attack came at midnight. I woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of breaking glass. Flames licked at the barn walls, my beautiful barn that Walter had built with his own hands. I grabbed the rifle and ran outside. 5 men stood in my yard, torches in hand. I recognized them all. Tom Briggs, Dale Morrison, the Baxter brothers. And leading them, of course, was Harlan Cross. Evening, Grace, he said, as casual as if he'd come calling for tea. Seems you've got a fire problem. Get off my land. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. Now that's no way to talk to neighbors come to help. See, we heard you'd been having Indian troubles. Thought we'd check on you. One of the Baxter brothers laughed. Yeah, check on you real good. I raised the rifle. I'll shoot. No, you won't. Harlan stepped closer. You don't have it in you. Besides, what's one woman against 5 men? Be reasonable, Grace. This place is too much for you. Take my offer. Sell to me, move to town, find yourself a new husband. Everyone wins, except me. You're not winning now. He gestured to the burning barn. Next time, it might be the house, or you. That's when I heard it, a sound like wind through dry leaves, whispers in the darkness. The men heard it too. They turned, suddenly uncertain. 4 shadows materialized from the night. The warriors Chief Crowfeather had promised, painted for stealth, weapons drawn. They moved like smoke, silently surrounding us. Harlan's face went white. You brought them here. You're harboring hostiles. They're protecting me from you, I said. One of the warriors spoke in broken English. You go, now. And the Baxter brothers didn't need to be told twice. They backed toward their horses, eyes wide with terror. The others followed, even Harlan, though he tried to maintain his swagger. This isn't over, he called as he mounted. The whole town will hear about this. You've chosen your side, Grace McKinnon. Now you'll live with it. And in they galloped away, leaving me standing in my nightgown with 4 Lakota warriors, watching my barn burn. I found Chief Crowfeather's necklace beneath the collar of my nightgown as the warriors and I watched the barn blaze against the night. sky. The flames reflected in their dark eyes, turning them to pools of dancing light. None of us moved to fight the fire. We all knew it was already lost, and that saving it would only invite more trouble. The tallest warrior, who'd spoken earlier, stepped forward. "I am Night Wind," he said carefully, his English thick with effort. "Chief says watch, we watch." "Deep, thank you," I managed, though my throat was tight with smoke and loss. He shook his head. "You save Samuel, we save you. This is balance." Balance. What an elegant way to describe the chaos my life had become. 2 days ago, I was just another struggling widow. Now I stood protected by Lakota warriors while my neighbors tried to burn me out. "Your barn," Nightwind continued, gesturing at the flames. "We help rebuild. They'll only burn it again." He considered this, then nodded grimly. "Yes, they fear what they don't understand." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Samuel lives. Wanted you know." The relief that flooded through me was unexpected. I'd known the young scout for less than a day, yet his fate had somehow become entwined with mine. "I'm glad," I said. By dawn, the barn was a smoking pile of charred timber. The warriors had melted back into the landscape, invisible again, but somehow still present. I stood in my yard, soot-stained and exhausted, surveying the damage. That's when I saw the riders approaching, not from town this time, but from the north. My hand went instinctively to the rifle, but something made me pause. There were only 3 of them moving slowly. No war paints, no weapons visible. As they drew closer, I recognized the lead rider's upright posture, the way he held himself even wounded. Samuel. He rode carefully, obviously still in pain, flanked by 2 companions. They stopped at the fence line, the same spot where his uncle had stood yesterday. Our eyes met across the distance, and something electric passed between us. "You shouldn't be riding," I called out. "You should be healing." He dismounted gingerly, wincing but trying to hide it. "Heard about fire, had to come." "Samuel." I started to protest, but he was already walking toward me, his companions staying with the horses. Up close, I could see the toll the ride had taken. Sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool morning air. The wound was properly bandaged now, wrapped in clean white cloth, but fresh blood had started to seep through. "Stubborn," I muttered. "Just like—" I caught myself before saying, "every man I've known." Something told me Samuel wasn't like any man I'd known. He looked at the barn's remains, then back at me. "They did this because of me." "They did this because of them," I corrected. "Because of fear and hatred and small minds." He studied my face with that intense gaze I remembered from the night I'd found him. Then his eyes dropped to my neck, where the bear claw necklace hung openly now. "You wear it," he said softly. "Your uncle said it would protect me. It marks you as family." He reached out, then seemed to catch himself, hand hovering uncertainly between us. "May I?" I nodded. His fingers brushed the bear claws gently, barely grazing my collarbone. The touch sent an unexpected shiver through me. Not fear, but something else entirely. "This was my grandfather's," he said. "He wore it in the wars against the Crow. Uncle honors you greatly. I just gave you water." His eyes met mine again. "You gave more than water. You gave trust when trust could have killed you." Behind us, one of his companions called out in Lakota. Samuel answered without turning, his gaze still holding mine. The other warrior laughed, a knowing sound that made heat rise in my cheeks. "What did he say?" I asked. Samuel's jaw tightened slightly. "He reminds me we should go, that I'm not yet healed." "He's right. You shouldn't have come, but I did." He stepped back, and I felt the loss of his nearness like a cold wind. "And I will come again." "Samuel, you are alone here. Your people have turned against you." This is not right. I gestured helplessly at the smoking ruins. What choice do I have? This is my home. Home is not always a place, he said, echoing his uncle's words. Sometimes it is people who see you truly. Before I could respond, he turned and walked. Back to his horse. The movement was stiff, pained. His companions helped him mount, exchanging words I couldn't understand, but whose meaning was clear. Concern, argument, resignation. As they prepared to leave, Samuel looked back one last time. Grace McKinnon, he said, my name sounding different on his tongue, musical somehow. You are braver than you know. They rode away, leaving me standing amid the ashes of my old life, wondering if courage and foolishness were really so different. The town's response came swiftly. By noon, a delegation arrived. Sheriff Pike, Judge Wells, Reverend Aldrich, and several prominent citizens. Their faces were set in the grim lines of men who'd made hard decisions. Judge Wells, a fair man who'd helped me with the deed after Walter's death, spoke first. Grace, we've come to discuss your situation. My situation? I kept my voice level, though my hands clenched at my sides. The Indian problem, Reverend Aldrich interjected. You're harboring hostiles, putting the entire community at risk. I harbored one wounded man, once, days ago. And now you have warriors camping on your land, someone called from the back, protecting you from decent folk. Sheriff Pike raised a hand for quiet. Grace, we understand you were trying to help, but things have gone too far. After last night, when 5 men tried to burn me out, they were concerned citizens. Harlan Cross's voice came from behind the others. He pushed forward, his burned hand wrapped in a bandage. Apparently, the warriors had left their mark, trying to protect our community from Indian lovers and their savage friends. The word hung in the air. Savage. Such an easy word, reducing complex people to simple fears. Judge Wells cleared his throat. The town council held an emergency. Meeting this morning, we voted to give you an ultimatum. My stomach dropped. What kind of ultimatum? Renounce any association with the Lakota. Allow us to post guards on your property to ensure no further contact. Or sell your land and leave Settlers Ridge. The words felt like physical blows. You can't force me off my own land. Actually, Harlan smiled coldly, we can. Town charter allows for the removal of elements deemed dangerous to public safety. Judge Wells can explain the legal details. The judge's face showed his discomfort, but his voice remained steady. It's true. Under territorial law, the town council has certain authorities in matters of security. This is my home, I said, hating how my voice cracked. Walter and I built this place with our bare hands. Walter's dead, Harlan said bluntly, and he'd be ashamed to see what you've become. The cruelty of it stole my breath. Several men shifted uncomfortably, but no one contradicted him. Sheriff Pike stepped forward, his expression almost kind. Grace, be reasonable. You're a young woman alone. It's natural you'd be frightened, maybe make some poor choices, but it's not too late. Denounce them. Let us protect you properly. Be the good Christian woman this town needs you to be. I looked at each face. Men I'd known for years, who'd eaten at my table, who'd carried Walter's coffin. Now they watched me like I was a stranger, or worse, a threat. And if I refuse, then you have 3 days to settle your affairs, Judge Wells said formally. After that, any remaining property will be seized, and you'll be escorted from town. Limits. Where would I go? Silence. They hadn't thought that far, or they had and didn't care. Anywhere but here, Harlan finally said. They left me standing in my ruined yard, their ultimatum hanging in the air like smoke. 3 days to choose. Betray the people who'd protected me, or lose everything. That night, I sat by candlelight, writing lists, What to pack, what to sell, what to abandon. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pen. At midnight I gave up and walked outside. The stars were brilliant, undimmed by any town lights. Somewhere out there, 4 warriors kept watch. Somewhere beyond that, Samuel lay healing. And somewhere past, even that was a world I didn't know, filled with people I'd been taught to fear. I don't know what to do, I whispered to the darkness. The darkness surprisingly answered. You do know. Nightwind materialized from shadow, making me jump. Heart knows, mind fights. It's not that simple. He came closer, his face serious in the starlight. Chief Crowfeather sends message. Says you welcome among our people. Says there is place for you. I stared at him. Live with the Lakota, but you are woman who chose mercy over fear, who carries the bear claw blessing, who Samuel speaks of with light in eyes. That last part made my cheeks warm. He barely knows me. Nightwind smiled, the first time I'd seen any expression on his stoic face. Sometimes spirit recognizes spirit quickly, like lightning finding earth. And if I came with you, what then? I don't speak your language, don't know your ways. You learn, we teach. Samuel teaches. His smile widened slightly. He already asks many questions about white women customs. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. Does he? Many questions. Why they wear such heavy clothes, why they need so many walls, why they fear silence. Nightwind's impression of Samuel was surprisingly accurate. And what did you tell him? That he must ask you himself. The idea was taking root, terrifying and exhilarating, leave everything I'd known, start fresh among people who judged me by my actions, not my past. The town will call me a traitor. Town already calls you many things. What matters is what you call yourself. I thought of Samuel's eyes when he'd seen me wearing the necklace, of Chief Crowfeather's surprising gentleness, of these warriors risking themselves to guard a stranger. Then I thought of Harlan's cruelty, the Reverend's righteousness, the town's swift judgment. When? I asked. Nightwind's expression showed he understood what I was really asking. Tomorrow night, pack light, leave at moon's highest point. We escort you to winter camp. And my land? Land is earth. Earth remains. You take what matters, memories, strength, hope. After he melted back into darkness, I stood there shaking, not from cold or fear, but from the magnitude of what I was choosing. By leaving, I wouldn't just be changing homes. I'd be crossing a boundary few white women had ever crossed, entering a world that existed in opposition to everything I'd been raised to believe. But what had my world offered me? A cold marriage to a man who'd planned to sell our home without telling me. A town quick to threaten a widow who showed basic human kindness. A future bounded by other people's expectations. I went inside and began to pack differently. Not lists now, but choices. My grandmother's Bible, the small carved wooden box where I kept her rosary, a photograph of my parents, Walter's watch, not from love, but because it might trade for necessities, practical clothes, my meager savings. As dawn approached, exhaustion finally overtook me. I dozed in the chair by the cold fireplace, dreaming of painted horses and dark eyes full of unspoken promises. The pounding on my door jolted me awake. Sun streamed through the windows. I'd slept longer than intended. The pounding came again, accompanied by Sheriff Pike's voice. "Grace, open up. Official business." I smoothed my skirt, touched the bear claw necklace for courage, and opened the door. The sheriff stood there with a full posse, not just townsmen this time, territorial marshals, their badges glinting in the morning sun. Behind them, half the town had gathered, including a smug-looking Harlan cross. "What's this about?" I asked, though my sinking heart already knew. "New information has come to light," Judge Wells said formally. He held up a piece of paper. Mr. Cross has presented documentation suggesting your late husband had agreed to sell this property. Combined with your recent activities, the council has voted to expedite proceedings. Expedite? You said 3 days. That was before we learned about the continued Indian presence on your land, Sheriff Pike said apologetically. Grace, 4 warriors were spotted near Sage River this morning, armed, watching the town. They're watching me, protecting me. I gestured at the armed crowd, from this. Nevertheless, their presence constitutes a clear threat. You'll come with us now. Your belongings will be packed and sent to wherever you choose to go. And if I refuse? The sheriff's hand moved to his gun. Several men behind him did the same. Please don't make this harder than necessary. I looked at their faces, neighbors, acquaintances, men who tipped their hats to me just weeks ago. Now they watched me like I was dangerous, a woman who'd stepped outside the boundaries they'd drawn for her. May I gather a few personal items? Judge Wells nodded. 15 minutes. Deputy Morrison will accompany you. The deputy followed me inside, watching as I collected the things I'd packed the night before. When I reached for Walter's rifle, he tensed, just wanting to return it. To the sheriff, I said. It belongs to the town anyway. He relaxed and I carefully wrapped the gun in cloth. As I did, I slipped a small knife into my boot, a gift from my father, who taught me that a lady should always have protection. Back outside, the crowd had grown. Women clustered in groups, whispering behind gloved hands. Children peered around their mothers' skirts, all watching the fall of Grace McKinnon. Where will you go? Sheriff Pike asked as he helped me onto the wagon they'd brought. I have relatives in St. Louis, I lied. He nodded, relieved. City relatives were respectable, safe, far from here. As the wagon rolled through town, people lined the streets. Some looked ashamed, avoiding my eyes. Others glared openly. Reverend Aldrich stood on the church steps, his face stern with righteous satisfaction. Only one person showed any kindness. Emma Hartley ran from her store, pressing a small packet into my hands. Journey bread, she whispered, and other things. Be safe, Grace. Before I could thank her, her husband pulled her back, scolding her for interfering. They took me to the stage depot at the edge of town. My packed belongings were already there, loaded onto a coach bound for Cheyenne. This ticket will take you as far as Denver, Judge Wells said, handing me an envelope. From there, you're on your own. My money, your assets have been frozen pending the property transfer. This ticket is courtesy of the town council. Consider it a parting gift. A gift. They were stealing my land, my home, my life's work, and calling it a gift. Sheriff Pike helped me into the coach. His touch was gentle, his eyes troubled. Grace, I'm sorry it came to this. If you just what? Denied my conscience, turned away a dying man, become someone I'm not? He had no answer. The driver cracked his whip and the coach lurched forward. I pressed my face to the window, watching Settlers Ridge shrink behind us. Somewhere in those buildings, Harlan Cross was probably already celebrating his victory, but I wasn't going to Denver. I had other plans. The coach made its first stop at Willow Creek, a trading post 10 miles from town. While the driver changed horses, I slipped away into the gathering darkness. Emma's packet contained not just food, but something else, a note. The warriors watched the North Road at the burned oak. Go at sunset. God forgive us all. E. Emma had known. Somehow she'd known I wouldn't run to city relatives. She'd given me a chance. I hiked through the darkness, guided by stars and instinct. The burned oak was a landmark everyone knew. Struck by lightning years ago, it stood like a sentinel on the prairie. As I approached, my heart hammered against my ribs. What if they weren't there? What if the town had lied about seeing warriors? What if Grace McKinnon? I spun toward the voice. 4 shadows separated from the darkness. Nightwind stepped forward, his face unreadable. "We thought you chose the town," he said. "The town chose for me." I showed him my empty hands. "I have nothing now, no home, no land, no—" "You have courage, you have the bear claw blessing, you have choice." He paused. "And you have someone waiting." My heart skipped. "Samuel?" Nightwind almost smiled. "He heals slowly, asks every scout for news of the white woman who saves warriors, drives healing women crazy with questions." Despite everything, the loss, the fear, the uncertainty, I found myself smiling. "Does he? Come, long ride to winter camp. You ride with Snow Eagle." He gestured to one of the other warriors, who led forward an extra horse. As I mounted, I looked back one last time toward Settler's Ridge. Somewhere beyond those hills lay my old life. The ranch Walter had built, the town that had shaped me, the grave where my husband lay. But I wasn't that woman anymore. The Grace McKinnon who'd lived by other people's rules had died the moment I'd given water to an enemy. Who I would become, that remained to be written. "I'm ready," I said. We rode into the night. 4 Lakota warriors and 1 white woman, heading toward a future none of us could predict. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to human boundaries. The bear claws clicked softly against my chest with each hoofbeat, a rhythm like a heartbeat, like a promise. Somewhere ahead, Samuel Whitehawk waited. Somewhere ahead, a new life beckoned. And somewhere behind, the woman I used to be whispered goodbye to everything she'd thought mattered. The wind carried sage and possibility. I breathed it in and rode on. The ride stretched through the night, across landscapes I'd only seen from the safety of wagon roads. We followed paths invisible to my eyes, guided by knowledge passed down through generations. The warriors moved their horses like shadows, silent, except for the soft thud of hooves on earth. I clung to the saddle, grateful for the darkness that hid my awkwardness. Ranch work had taught me to ride, but not like this, not through unmarked wilderness, with only starlight as witness. My muscles screamed protest, but I bit my lip and endured. These men had risked everything to help me. I wouldn't shame their trust with complaints. As dawn approached, the landscape began to change. Rolling hills gave way to rougher country, marked by deep ravines and stands of pine. We stopped at a creek to water the horses, and Nightwind brought me strips of dried meat. "Eat," he said simply, "still far to go." The meat was tough, seasoned with herbs I didn't recognize. As I chewed, I watched the warriors tend their horses with practiced care. They moved differently here, more relaxed. We'd crossed some invisible boundary into their territory. "Are we safe now?" I asked. Nightwind considered this. "Safer, but cavalry patrols everywhere since Little Bighorn. Must stay careful." The name sent a shiver through me. Little Bighorn. Custer's last stand, the newspapers had called it. The battle that had changed everything, turned skirmishes into war. And here I was, riding with the very people my world called enemies. We reached the winter camp as the sun touched the western mountains. I smelled it first, smoke from countless fires, the rich scent of cooking meat, the earthy smell of many horses. Then we crested a ridge, and it spread before us like a vision. Hundreds of teepees arranged in careful circles, their pale hides glowing in the late afternoon light. Children ran between them, dogs barking at their heels. Women worked at outdoor fires while men tended weapons or horses. It was a city of sorts, but one that could vanish overnight if needed. Our arrival caused a stir. People emerged from teepees, conversations died, children stopped playing. All eyes turned to the white woman riding with warriors. Nightwind raised his hand, calling out in Lakota. I caught Samuel's name among the unfamiliar words. The crowd began to murmur, some pointing at the bear claw necklace visible at my throat. Then I saw him. Samuel stood at the far edge of the camp, supported by a walking stick but upright. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture, the way he leaned forward, as if pulled by invisible strings. Our eyes met across the space between us, and the rest of the world faded. He started forward, moving carefully, but with purpose. The crowd parted, creating a path between us. I slid from my horse on shaking legs, barely able to stand after hours in the saddle. We met in the middle, surrounded by hundreds of watching eyes, but somehow entirely alone. Up close, I could see how thin he'd become, how pain still lined his face, but his eyes were bright, alive with something that made my breath catch. "You came," he said softly. "You knew I would?" "Hoped, prayed, asked the spirits every night." He reached out, fingers brushing the bear claw necklace. "It suits you." "Samuel," a woman's voice, sharp with authority. I turned to see her, approaching, young, perhaps my age, with Samuel's high cheekbones and proud bearing. Her dress was decorated with elaborate beadwork, her hair in 2 long braids wrapped in otter fur. She said something rapid in Lakota. Samuel responded, his tone respectful but firm. The woman's dark eyes fixed on me, taking in every detail from my dusty dress to my pale skin. "My sister," Samuel said in English, "Maggie Whitehawk." So this was the Maggie he'd called for in his fever dreams. She didn't extend a hand or smile. Instead, she circled me slowly, like a horse trader examining questionable stock. "This is the white woman who saved you?" She spoke English perfectly, with barely an accent. "Yes. She's young, pretty enough, I suppose, but soft. Can she work? Can she survive winter? Can she—" "Maggie." Samuel's voice carried a warning. She ignored him, stopping directly in front of me. "You know what you've chosen? This isn't some romantic adventure. Winter comes soon. Food grows scarce. The army hunts us. Many will die before spring." I met her fierce gaze steadily. I had nowhere else to go. "Everyone has somewhere else. You chose this. Why?" I thought of all the proper answers: gratitude, moral obligation, Christian duty. But looking at this woman who radiated strength and suspicion, I knew only truth would suffice. "Because your brother looked at me and saw a person, not just a white woman. Because your uncle's warriors protected me when my own people tried to burn me out. Because I'm tired of living in a world where kindness is considered betrayal." Maggie studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. It transformed her face completely. "You'll do," she said. "Come. You need proper clothes. And that hair, eagles could nest in it." She took my arm, leading me away from Samuel toward a large teepee decorated with geometric patterns. I glanced back to see him watching us go, a smile playing at his lips. Inside the teepee, several women sat working on various tasks. They looked up as we entered, conversations stopping. Maggie spoke rapidly in Lakota, gesturing toward me. Some women frowned, others looked curious. One elderly woman with silver hair laughed and said something that made the others smile. "She says you have good bones," Maggie translated. "Strong shoulders. Maybe you won't die after all." That's comforting. Maggie began pulling items from painted parfleches, storage containers made of rawhide. "Strip," she commanded. What?" "Your clothes. Burn them. Too heavy, too hot. Smell like death and sadness." She held up a soft doe-skin dress, beautifully decorated with blue and white beads. "This was mine, but you're taller. Should fit." I hesitated, aware of the other women watching. Privacy, I was learning, meant something different here. "Modesty is luxury," Maggie said, reading my discomfort. "Here, we're practical. Change." I did, fumbling with unfamiliar ties and fastenings. The dress felt strange, lighter than my cotton and wool, but somehow warmer. Maggie nodded approval and began attacking my hair with a bone comb. "Like trying to tame a tornado," she muttered. "How do white women manage?" "Pins, lots of pins, and prayer." She laughed, the first genuinely warm sound I'd heard from her. "Samuel said you were funny. He talked about you constantly, drove everyone crazy. He barely knows me. Sometimes. The heart knows quickly. Other times," she sighed, "other times we're blind too long." There was a story there, but before I could ask, Chief Crowfeather entered the teepee. The women immediately showed respect, though not the cowering deference I might have expected. He studied my transformation with approval. "Better," he said. "Now you look less like captive, more like guest." "Am I a guest?" His eyes were kind, but serious. "That depends on you and on council." "Council? Tonight, the elder men meet. Decide if you stay, if we risk keeping white woman when soldiers hunt us." He paused. "Samuel will speak for you. Others may not be welcoming." My stomach tightened. I'd fled one judgment only to face another. What should I do? Be yourself. Answer truthfully, and remember, we judge actions, not birth. After he left, Maggie finished with my hair, braiding it into 2 plaits like her own. "There, now you almost look human." "Thank you, I think." She squeezed my shoulder. "Council can be frightening, but you've already passed the hardest test." "What test?" "You chose mercy over fear. Everything else is just details." That evening they came for me. Samuel waited outside the teepee, dressed formally in a shirt decorated with intricate quill work. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed worry. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'll go anyway." He almost smiled. Bravery isn't absence of fear, it's acting despite it. We walked through the camp as darkness fell. Fires bloomed like flowers, casting dancing shadows on teepee walls. People watched us pass, some curious, some hostile, many simply uncertain. The council lodge stood at the camp center, larger than the others. Smoke rose from its peak, and I could hear voices within, deep, measured, speaking in the cadence of formal debate. "Wait here," Samuel said. He disappeared inside. I stood, alone, aware of eyes watching from the shadows. A group of young warriors lingered nearby, their faces hard with suspicion. One said something that made the others laugh, not a kind sound. Then the lodge flap opened. An elderly man beckoned me inside. The interior was larger than expected, with a fire burning at the center. Men sat in a circle around it, some ancient, others in their prime. All wore their finest clothes, faces painted with symbols I couldn't read. Chief Crowfeather sat at the far side, his expression unreadable. They'd left a space for me to stand, directly across from the chief. Samuel stood to one side, unable to sit with the council but present as my advocate. The silence stretched until an elder with deeply lined face spoke. His voice carried the weight of years, though I understood none of the words. Samuel translated, "Iron Bull asks why the council should risk war with the whites for one woman." "Because she risked her safety for one Lakota," Chief Crowfeather responded in English, clearly wanting me to understand. Another man spoke, younger, his tone sharp with anger. Samuel's translation came reluctantly. "Red Horse says white women bring trouble. They're weak, demanding, useless for real work. This one will expect special treatment, complain constantly, create discord among our people." "Tell him he's right," I said suddenly. The council stirred. Samuel stared at me. "Grace? Tell him he's right about white women. Most of us are exactly as he says, weak, pampered, expecting others to serve us." I met Red Horse's glare. "But I'm not most white women, not anymore." "Prove it," Red Horse challenged in English. "Words mean nothing." I thought of all I'd lost, all I'd chosen. Then I rolled up my sleeves, showing arms marked by years of ranch work. These hands built fence posts, birthed calves, hauled water when the well ran low. They've known work. I touched the fading bruise where the stone had struck in town. This mark came from my own people, punishment for showing mercy. I've known rejection. Finally, I lifted the bear claw necklace, and this was given by your chief when I chose humanity over hatred. I've known choice. An older man spoke, his voice thoughtful. Samuel translated, "Standing elk remembers other white. Women taken in raids. They cried constantly, tried to escape, made everyone miserable until ransomed back. What makes you different?" I wasn't taken. I chose to come. There's no ransom waiting, no family searching. I burnt those bridges when I helped Samuel. Why? The question came from multiple voices. I looked at each face, ending with Samuel. Because I was tired of living half a life, following rules made by people who never questioned them. Because when I saw Samuel bleeding, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a man who might die alone. Because kindness shouldn't depend on the color of someone's skin. The debate continued in Lakota, voices rising and falling like waves. Some clearly supported me, others remained skeptical. Samuel added his voice occasionally, but I could tell he was limited in what he could say. Advocacy could only go so far. Finally, Chief Crowfeather raised his hand for silence. He spoke slowly, each word measured. "The bear claw necklace marks her as friend to the Lakota. She has shown courage, compassion, and sacrifice, but staying through winter is different. She must contribute, work, learn our ways. No special treatment, no complaints. If she fails, she leaves." He looked directly at me. "Do you accept these terms?" "I do." "Then we vote." He drew out a decorated pipe, lighting it with ceremony. It passed around the circle, each man smoking in turn. Some exhaled toward me, a blessing. Others blew smoke away, rejection. When the pipe completed its circle, Chief Crowfeather counted silently. The weight felt eternal. "The council accepts Grace McKinnon as winter guest," he announced finally. "Maggie Whitehawk will be her guide and teacher. She'll share their lodge, learn our ways." His eyes found mine. "May the spirits grant you strength. You'll need it." Relief flooded through me so powerfully, my knees nearly buckled. Samuel stepped forward, not touching me, but close enough that I felt his warmth. "Thank you," I whispered to the council. Red Horse, my harshest critic, stood. "Words of welcome don't fill empty bellies or build warm lodges. We'll see if her soft hands can truly work." But his tone held less hostility now, more challenge. As we filed out, the elderly man who'd asked about other white women touched my arm. In careful English, he said, "You spoke well. Truth has power. Remember that when winter tests you." Outside, the camp had gathered. News traveled fast here. People pressed close, some offering tentative smiles, others maintaining careful distance. Children peeked from behind their mother's skirts. Maggie appeared at my side. "Congratulations, you're now officially my problem." "Lucky you." "Indeed." But she was smiling. "Come, you've had enough excitement. Tomorrow, real work begins." As she led me away, I turned to Samuel. He stood apart, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride mixed with concern, hope tempered by uncertainty. "Thank you," I called to him, "for speaking for me." "Thank yourself," he replied. "Your words won their hearts, not mine." That night, lying on soft furs in Maggie's teepee, I stared up through the smoke hole at strange stars. Everything I'd known lay behind me. My language, my customs, my very identity being reshaped with each passing hour. The winter would test. Me Red Horse was right about that, but I'd been tested before, by drought, by loss, by the cruelty of those who should have shown kindness. I'd survived those trials. I would survive this one. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. A woman sang. A lullaby in words I didn't understand, but whose meaning transcended language. Dogs barked, horses nickered. The camp settled into sleep around me, and I realized something that made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. For the first time since Walter died, perhaps for the first time ever, I felt like I might belong somewhere. The feeling scared me, more than any winter storm could. Morning came too soon. Maggie shook me awake, while stars still glittered overhead. Up, Work begins before sun. Every muscle protested as I struggled into the unfamiliar dress. My hands fumbled with ties and fastenings. Maggie watched with amused impatience. "Like watching a bear try to dance," she muttered, reaching to help. "How you survived alone?" "Badly," I admitted. She grunted approval at my honesty. "At least you know. Come." The camp was already stirring. Women moved between teepees like ghosts, tending fires that had burned low overnight. The air bit with autumn cold, making me grateful for the warm doe-skin. Maggie led me to the nearby stream where women gathered water. Some nodded greeting, others pretended not to see me. I filled the heavy bladder bags as Maggie showed me, trying not to splash my new dress. "Balance on hip," she instructed. "Use whole body, not just arms." The technique felt awkward at first, but I could see its wisdom. Ranch work had taught me similar lessons: work smarter, not harder. Back at the teepee, she set me to grinding dried berries with a stone pestle. "For pemmican," she explained, "mix with meat, fat, keeps all winter. You know this? We dried meat, salt-cured hams. But this is different. Everything here different. Must forget white ways, learn Lakota ways, otherwise." She made a cutting gesture across her throat. The work was monotonous but strangely soothing. Around us, the camp came fully alive. Children ran past, playing games I didn't recognize. Men emerged from teepees, some heading out to hunt, others working on weapons or tools. I saw Samuel briefly, walking with other young men toward the horse herd. He glanced my way but didn't approach. There were proprieties here I didn't yet understand, boundaries I couldn't see but sensed nonetheless. "Stop mooning," Maggie said without looking up from her own work. "I wasn't." "Yes, you were. He's pretty, I know, but pretty doesn't keep you warm when snow comes." She fixed me with a stern look. "You want to catch his interest? Prove you can survive. Lakota men value strength, skill, endurance, not soft hands and softer hearts." The days folded into one another like pages in a book I was still learning to read. Each morning brought new Lakota words to stumble over, new skills that made my clumsy fingers ache. The women watched my struggles with hide scraping, their eyes holding judgment. That slowly warmed to cautious approval as autumn deepened into winter's edge. Maggie remained my constant teacher and critic. "Hold the bone scraper at an angle," she'd say, demonstrating again how to clean a deer hide without tearing holes. "Like this, feel the grain of the skin. It tells you which way to work." My hands, once soft enough to embroider delicate patterns on Sunday handkerchiefs, grew rough and strong. Blisters formed, burst, and hardened into calluses. Each small victory, a properly tanned rabbit pelt, a pot of stew that didn't burn, felt monumental. The children were my first allies. They found my pronunciation hilarious, giggling behind their hands when I confused similar-sounding words. But they also patiently corrected me, turning language lessons into games. Little Running Fox, a boy of 6 winters, appointed himself my special tutor. No, he'd say, shaking his head gravely. Shunka is dog, Shuenji is horse. You just asked if you could ride the dog." Their laughter rang across the camp, and I found myself laughing too, something I hadn't done freely since Walter's death. But acceptance came in fragments, not floods. Many still watched me with suspicion, particularly the older women who'd lost family to white soldiers. I felt their stares like cold wind on my neck as I worked alongside Maggie, pretending not to notice when conversations stopped as I approached. The men largely ignored me, which Maggie assured me was proper. "Unmarried women don't speak casually. With warriors," she explained. "It's not rudeness, it's respect." Samuel I saw only from a distance. He'd returned to his duties as scout, riding out for days at a time to monitor army movements and buffalo herds. When he was in camp, propriety kept us apart. But sometimes our eyes would meet across the central fire, and the look in his would make my breath catch. "He watches you," Maggie observed one evening as we prepared sleeping robes, when he thinks no one notices. I watch him too, I admitted. She smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Good, but watching isn't enough. You must prove yourself first. Show you can be a true Lakota woman, not just a white refugee playing at our ways. The test came sooner than expected. 3 weeks into my new life, a hunting party returned with disturbing news. They'd found tracks, many horses shod in iron. Cavalry moving along the river valley 2 days' ride north. The camp tensed like a drawn bow. Chief Crowfeather called council immediately. I watched from Maggie's teepee as warriors gathered, their faces grave. Whatever they decided would affect us all, but women, especially white women who barely spoke the language, had no voice in such matters. Or so I thought. Night wind appeared at our teepee flap as darkness fell. Chief wants the white woman, he said in his careful English. Council needs to know about soldier ways. My stomach clenched. Maggie squeezed my shoulder. Tell them truth, she advised. They respect honesty even when it brings bad news. The council lodge felt suffocating despite the cold air. Smoke from the central fire stung my eyes as I stood before the assembled leaders. Chief Crowfeather gestured for me to sit, an unexpected honor that raised eyebrows among some elders. The hunting party found cavalry sign. He began without preamble. Many horses, moving this direction, but slowly. We need to know their intentions. How many horses? I asked. Perhaps 50, maybe more. My heart sank. That meant at least a company, possibly more. What time of year is it by the white calendar? Samuel translated quickly. The moon when leaves fall. October by their counting. October. My mind raced through everything I'd overheard in Settlers Ridge, every newspaper I'd read before leaving. They're not hunting you specifically, I said slowly. Not yet. October means they're probably establishing winter positions, securing supply lines before snow closes the passes. But if they find us, an elder pressed, they'll attack. After Little Bighorn, the army has orders to force all Lakota onto reservations, no exceptions. I met Chief Crowfeather's steady gaze. They consider any camp outside reservation boundaries hostile. Debate erupted in rapid Lakota. Some argued for immediate flight, others for finding defensive positions. A few young warriors suggested attacking first, a notion quickly dismissed by wiser heads. Finally, Chief Crowfeather raised his hand for silence. We moved the camp, not in panic but carefully, west into the broken lands where cavalry cannot follow easily. He looked at me. You know how soldiers track. Help our scouts understand what signs to hide. And so I found myself teaching warriors who'd been evading enemies since childhood how white soldiers thought, what they looked for, how they moved. It felt like betrayal and salvation all at once. Betraying the world I'd come from to protect, the one I'd chosen. The camp packed with practiced efficiency. Teepees came down in minutes, belongings loaded onto travois pulled by horses and dogs. I worked alongside the women, learning to pack a household into bundles that could travel rough country. As we prepared to move, Samuel finally approached. He carried a horse, a spotted mare with gentle eyes. For you, he said simply. The journey will be hard. Our fingers brushed as I took the lead rope. Thank you. He started to turn away, then stopped. You spoke well in council. Your knowledge may save lives. I hope so. I never thought I'd be helping plan against my own people. His eyes softened. They stopped being your people when they drove you out. Now you protect your new family. The words stayed with me as we began the grueling journey west. The land grew rougher with each passing day. Steep coulees, rocky ridges, paths barely wide enough for horses. Children rode silent on their mothers' backs. Dogs panted under heavy loads. Everyone watched the horizon for dust clouds that might signal pursuit. On the third day, my mare stumbled on loose shale. I managed to stay mounted, but my inexperience showed. Several women made disapproving noises. That night my legs trembled from exhaustion and my back screamed from hours of riding. "Soft," I heard one woman mutter, "she'll slow us down." Pride kept me from showing pain the next morning. I mounted stiffly, determined to prove them wrong. By midday, my thighs were raw, my spine felt like broken glass, but I kept riding. Maggie noticed, of course. "You're being stupid," she said bluntly. "Ask for help." I need to show I'm strong. Strength isn't suffering in silence. It's knowing when to accept aid. She called to another woman who wordlessly produced a salve for my chafed skin. We support each other. That's how we survive. The lesson stayed with me. Over the following days, I learned to ask for help and to offer it. When elderly Sweetgrass stumbled from fatigue, I was there to steady her. When young mothers needed someone to hold babies while they managed horses, I volunteered. Slowly, the suspicious look softened. On the 7th day, scouts reported soldiers had passed our former campsite but hadn't followed our trail. The tension eased slightly, though watchfulness remained. That night, as we camped in a sheltered valley, an elder named Yellow Wolf approached me. He'd never spoken to me directly before, and his presence made me nervous. "You knew we needed to move west," he said in careful English. "How?" I considered my words carefully. "Cavalry needs water for horses, flat ground for camps. West is dry, broken country, harder for them." He nodded slowly. "You think like a soldier." "I think like someone who listened when soldiers talked. My husband sold them supplies sometimes. They spoke freely around a woman, thinking I didn't understand or care. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Their blindness becomes our sight. This is good." He started to leave, then turned back. "The mare you ride, she's steady, sure-footed, but you sit her like a sack of grain. Tomorrow, I teach you to ride properly." And he did. Each day as we traveled, Yellow Wolf instructed me in horsemanship, how to move with the animal rather than against it, to guide with subtle shifts of weight rather than harsh rein work. Other elders began sharing knowledge too. Old Bear showed me how to read weather signs. Spotted Elk taught me to identify edible plants, even in this harsh landscape. Samuel watched these interactions from a distance, but I caught pride in his expression. One evening, as I helped repair a torn travois, he managed to speak with me briefly. "You're earning their respect," he said, "not through words but actions." "Is it enough?" I asked, thinking of the council's conditional acceptance. "Time will tell, but Yellow Wolf doesn't teach just anyone. Neither does Spotted Elk." He paused, then added quietly, "I'm proud of what you're becoming." The words warmed me through the cold night that followed. We reached our new winter camp as the first snow began to fall, a protected valley with a spring-fed creek surrounded by ridges that would break the worst winds. The placement showed generations of wisdom about surviving in this harsh land. As tippies went up with practiced coordination, I found myself working smoothly alongside women who'd barely tolerated me weeks before. My hands knew now how to tension the hide covering, where to place stakes for maximum stability. When White Buffalo Woman nodded approval at my work, it felt like a graduation of sorts. But winter brought new challenges. The easy abundance of autumn, berries, roots, small game, vanished under snow. Every calorie mattered now. I learned to make pemmican, that mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries that could sustain life through the hungriest months. My first attempts were disasters, too wet, too dry, proportions all wrong. Like this, Singing Cedar demonstrated, her ancient hands still sure. Feel the texture. It should hold together but not be sticky. The work was monotonous, pounding dried meat to powder, rendering fat, mixing in careful ratios. But I began. to understand it as meditation, each batch a prayer for survival. Food storage became an obsession. We cached supplies in hidden pits, hung meat high from trees, rationed everything carefully. I learned to make a single handful of wasna, another form of preserved food, last an entire day. My body, accustomed to regular meals, protested at first, but hunger sharpens adaptation. As winter deepened, another challenge emerged. The camp's usual healer, an elderly man named Medicine Crow, fell ill himself. Singing Cedar did her best, but her knowledge focused on women's medicine and spiritual healing. When children began coughing with a wet, persistent sound I recognized, fear rippled through the camp. "It's in their chests," Singing Cedar told me, frustration clear. "The white man's sickness. Our medicines don't touch it." Pneumonia! I'd seen it sweep through Settlers Ridge 2 winters back, taking the young and old with brutal efficiency. But I'd also watched Doc Sullivan treat it, had pestered him with questions until he'd shown me his methods. "I might be able to help," I offered carefully. "White healers have ways to fight this sickness." Singing Cedar's eyes sharpened. "You know healing?" "Some. My town's doctor taught me basic things. And I read his books after my husband died. They were company on long nights." She considered this, then nodded. "Show me." I started with what I remembered, keeping patients warm but not too hot, propping them up to ease breathing, encouraging. Fluids. I showed her how to percuss a chest, to hear where fluid accumulated, how to make a tent of blankets and steam to loosen congestion. For medicines, we had to improvise. No pharmaceutical compounds here, but I knew willow bark tea for fever, and Singing Cedar knew plants with similar properties. We combined knowledge, creating treatments that drew from both traditions. The first child we treated was Running Fox, my little language teacher. His mother watched anxiously as I listened to his labored breathing, felt his burning skin. "We need to break the fever," I told Singing Cedar, "and clear his lungs." We worked through the night, alternating traditional songs with practical interventions. By morning, his fever had dropped, his breathing eased. Within 3 days, he was demanding food, always a good sign in a sick child. Word spread quickly. Other mothers brought their children. We treated 12 cases that winter, losing only one, an infant who'd been sick too long before we saw her. Each success built trust, not just in my healing knowledge, but in my commitment to the people. Chief Crowfeather himself sought my counsel when his grandson fell ill. As I examined the boy, the chief watched with those penetrating eyes. "You could have kept this knowledge secret," he observed, "used it as power over us." "Healing isn't about power," I replied, preparing willow bark tea. "It's about service." He was quiet for a long moment. "You sound like my grandmother. She was a healer too." Higher praise, I learned later, could not be given. Samuel returned from a long scouting expedition to find me exhausted but exhilarated, having spent weeks fighting the illness that threatened. The camp. He arrived as I was leaving the healing lodge, and we nearly collided in the doorway. "Grace," he breathed, steadying me with hands on my shoulders. I looked up into his face, seeing new lines of fatigue and weather. "Samuel, you're back safely. I heard what you did, the children you saved." His hands tightened slightly. "Running Fox's mother says you stayed with him 3 days without sleep. He needed constant care. Singing Cedar was with other patients." "You're swaying on your feet," he interrupted gently. "When did you last eat?" I tried to remember and couldn't. Time had blurred into a cycle of patients and treatments. "I'm fine," I started to say, but the world tilted sideways. He caught me before I fell, scooping me up as if I weighed nothing. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but his voice held warmth. "Put me down," I protested weakly. "People will talk. Let them. You've earned the right to be carried." He bore me to Maggie's tipi, where his sister took one look and began preparing food. "She's been like this for weeks," Maggie informed. Him healing everyone but herself. I wanted to protest, but exhaustion crashed over me like a wave. The last thing I remembered was Samuel's hand smoothing my hair, his voice mixing with Maggie's in quiet conversation. I woke to firelight and the smell of rich broth. Night had fallen. Maggie sat nearby, mending a shirt by the fire's glow. "Good, you're awake. Eat." She handed me a bowl without ceremony. The broth tasted better than anything I'd ever eaten. As I drank, I became aware of hushed voices outside the tipi. Maggie noticed my attention. "Visitors," she said with a strange smile. "Been coming all day." "Visitors?" She gestured to the tipi entrance, where I now noticed bundles piled carefully. "Gifts, from families whose children you saved. From elders impressed by your sacrifice. From," her smile widened, "young men who suddenly find you very interesting." Heat flooded my cheeks. "That's not... I didn't do it for..." "But of course not. But actions have consequences. You've shown heart of a true healer, strength of a warrior's spirit. People notice." She pulled back the teepee flap slightly, revealing more bundles outside. Beaded moccasins from yellow wolves. "Wife, a hunting knife from Red Horse. Yes, the one who challenged you at council. A painted robe from Singing Cedar and..." She paused dramatically. "A very fine horse from someone who wishes to remain nameless, but whose scouting duties happen to bring him past our teepee frequently." My heart jumped. "Samuel? Who else? Though he's being properly indirect about it. Can't have a warrior making obvious courting gifts. Not suitable." Her eyes danced with mischief. "Of course, everyone knows anyway. He's been wearing his best shirt, fixing his hair carefully. His war friends tease him mercilessly." I hid my burning face in the bowl. The thought of Samuel preparing carefully for glimpses of me made my stomach flutter with nervous joy. Over the following days, I discovered Maggie was right about my changed status. The suspicious looks had vanished, replaced by nods of acknowledgement, occasional smiles. Children who'd whispered about the strange white woman now brought me small gifts, a pretty stone, a bird's feather. Elders included me in conversations about healing, weather patterns, camp management. Even Red Horse, my harshest early critic, sought my opinion on his persistent joint pain. As I prepared a poultice of herbs Singing Cedar had taught me about, he watched with grudging respect. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" He considered this carefully. "Weakness, complaints, demands for special treatment, white women we captured in raids." He paused, clearly editing his words. "They didn't adapt. You have." "I had good teachers," I replied, thinking of Maggie's relentless patience, Yellow Wolf's horse lessons, Singing Cedar's healing wisdom. "No." He shook his head firmly. "Teaching means nothing without willing student. You chose to learn, to become." He flexed his treated shoulder, nodding satisfaction at the increased mobility. "Chief was right about you." As winter gradually loosened its grip, the camp began to stir with talk of spring movements. Scouts reported increasing military activity to the east. Treaty negotiations had failed again. The government demanded all Lakota move to reservations by summer or be declared hostile. During one particularly tense council meeting that I was now invited to attend as an advisor on white military tactics, Chief Crowfeather posed a difficult question. "If soldiers come, if we must fight, where do you stand?" The lodge fell silent. Every eye turned to me. This was the test I'd known would come, choosing sides not in theory but in blood and battle. I thought of Settler's Ridge, of the stones thrown at my back, the barn burned by men I'd known for years. Then I looked around the lodge at faces that had become familiar, precious. People who'd taken me in when my own kind cast me out. "I stand with my people," I said firmly. with those who showed me mercy when I had none to claim, with the family that chose me when my own people rejected me. I stand with the Lakota." The silence stretched. Then Chief Crowfeather nodded slowly. "It is good. But understand, this choice may demand everything. Your former people will call you traitor. History may judge you harshly. Are you prepared for that?" "History is written by victors," I replied, "and victors aren't always right. I've seen which side shows true honor, true courage. I've made my choice." As the council dispersed, Samuel caught my arm. We stepped outside into crisp starlight, finally alone for the first time in months. "You meant it," he said. Not a question, but seeking confirmation anyway. "Every word." He studied my face in the dim light. "The path ahead is dangerous. The army grows stronger while we grow weaker. Many believe we're living the last free years of our people. Then we live them fully," I said, "together." His breath caught. "Grace." I stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth in the cold air. "I know there are proper ways. Courting rituals, family negotiations. But if time is precious, shouldn't we?" He kissed me. Not the careful, distant touch I might have expected, but something desperate and tender all at once. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since you threatened to turn me over to the army with a bullet in your rifle," he confessed. I laughed shakily. "The rifle wasn't loaded." "I know, but you didn't know I knew. Your courage in that moment." He pulled back to look at me. "I want to court you properly, to honor you as you deserve. Will you let me?" "Yes," I whispered. "Yes to everything." He smiled then, bright as summer lightning. "Maggie will be insufferable. She's been planning this for weeks." "Just Maggie?" I teased. "Yellow Wolf's wife asked me yesterday what kind of wedding dress I preferred." We laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet camp. Somewhere, a baby cried and was quickly soothed. Dogs barked at something in the darkness, normal sounds of life continuing despite the threats gathering like storm clouds on every horizon. "I should go," Samuel said reluctantly. "Propriety. Since when do we care about propriety?" But I stepped back, understanding the need to respect the customs of the people who'd accepted me. He caught my hand as I turned to go. "Grace, that choice you made in council, you know it wasn't really a choice. Your heart decided long ago." I squeezed his fingers. "The moment I gave water to a dying enemy, I chose a different path. Everything since has just been learning where that path leads. And where does it lead?" I looked up at the stars, then back at his beloved face. Home. It leads home. As I entered Maggie's teepee, she looked up with a knowing smile. "So, my foolish brother finally spoke his heart? How did you—" I started, then laughed. "Of course you know. You know everything that happens in this camp. Not everything, but enough." She patted the robe beside her. "Come, we have plans to make. Spring brings changes, and not all of them pleasant. But first, we'll give the camp something to celebrate. A wedding to remind us why we fight to stay free." Outside, wind whispered. Through the winter-bare cottonwoods. Inside, we began to plan a future that might be brief, but would be lived without regret. As I worked beside the woman who'd become my sister in all but blood, I marveled at the journey that had brought me here. From a dry well in Wyoming to a Lakota winter camp, from widow to healer, from outsider to chosen family. The path had been hard, the price high. But as laughter drifted from nearby teepees and stars, wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, I knew I would walk it again without hesitation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The army would come eventually. Battles would be fought and possibly lost. But tonight, I sat planning my wedding to a man who taught me that home isn't a place but a choice, surrounded by people who'd shown me that family isn't blood, but heart. And that was worth everything I'd left behind and more. As sleep finally claimed me, I touched the bear claw necklace that had started it all. Such a small thing to mark such a vast transformation. But the biggest changes often start with the smallest acts. A cup of water, a moment's mercy, a choice to see humanity where others see only enemies. The winter wind sang around the tippy poles, and I smiled in the darkness. Let it sing. I was home. Spring arrived like a warrior returning from battle, sudden, fierce, and full of changes. The ice on the creek shattered with sounds like gunfire, making everyone tense until we realized it was just winter dying. Snow melted into mud that grabbed at our moccasins, and the first green shoots pushed through earth that had seemed dead just days before. With the changing season came preparations for my wedding to Samuel. Lakota ceremonies differed vastly from the white Christian weddings I'd known, yet the joy felt universal. Maggie threw herself into planning with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including herself. "My stubborn brother finally chooses a wife," she announced to anyone who'd listen. And not just any wife. A woman who saved children from the white man's cough, who counsels our chiefs on enemy tactics, who rode 7 days without complaint when we fled the soldiers. Her praise made me uncomfortable, but I was learning that humility meant accepting recognition gracefully rather than deflecting it entirely. The entire camp contributed to the preparations. Yellow Wolf's wife, Singing Dove, spent hours teaching me the complex beadwork patterns that would decorate my wedding dress. Her patience astounded me, especially when my clumsy attempts ruined expensive beads. "Again," she'd say simply, handing me fresh materials. "Perfection comes through practice, not wishes." Singing Cedar prepared special herbs and medicines, explaining their significance as she worked. "This sage purifies. This sweet grass calls good spirits. This cedar root ensures fertility." She paused, eyeing me speculatively. "Many strong children, I think. Your hips are good." I blushed furiously, but she just cackled and continued her work. Even Red Horse, once my fiercest opponent, contributed a beautifully tanned elk hide. "For your teepee," he said gruffly. "Elk is strong, endures all seasons, like a good marriage should be." But beneath the celebration, tension coiled like a rattlesnake. Scouts brought increasingly dire news, soldiers massing at Fort Robinson, supply wagons rolling west, talk of a summer campaign to end the Indian problem once and for all. During a quiet moment while fitting my wedding dress, Maggie voiced what everyone was thinking. "This may be the last celebration our people know as free Lakota. The last marriage blessed under open skies instead of on some reservation." I stopped, her hands as she adjusted the dress's yoke. "Then we make it count. We celebrate not just our joy, but our defiance. Love in the face of those who destroy us." She smiled sadly. "You've become more Lakota than some born to it. The people's spirit lives in your heart now." 3 days before the ceremony, Samuel returned from a scouting expedition with news that changed everything. He found me working with Singing Cedar, preparing medications for the camp's store. His face told the story before his words. "Grace, I need to speak with you, alone." We walked to the edge of camp, where the prairie stretched endlessly under. A sky so blue it hurt. He took my hands, and I felt them trembling. "What is it?" I asked, though my heart already knew. "General Crook is mobilizing 5,000 troops. They're calling it the Great Sioux War. Orders are to force every band onto reservations or destroy them." He swallowed hard. "They know about this camp. Someone in Settlers Ridge told them about the white woman living with hostiles. They're coming for us, specifically." The world tilted. "Because of me?" Because resistance can't be tolerated. A white woman choosing our way of life makes them question everything they believe about civilization and savagery. His hands tightened on mine. Chief Crowfeather calls council tonight. We must decide. Flee deeper into the mountains, surrender to the reservation, or fight, I finished. Or fight. He searched my face. I won't ask you to face this. There's still time. You could ride to Fort Robinson, claim you were held captive. They'd believe it. Welcome you back as a rescued victim. Anger flared hot and sudden. After everything you think I'd abandon? No. He pressed his fingers to my lips. I know you won't, but I had to offer. My conscience demanded it. I caught his hand, held it against my cheek. Your conscience can rest. I made my choice months ago. I choose it again every morning when I wake. I'll choose it until my last breath. That night's council was the most somber I'd attended. Warriors and elders packed the lodge, faces painted for ceremony, but hearts heavy with knowledge. Chief Crowfeather opened with prayers, then laid out our options with stark clarity. The soldiers come with numbers we cannot match. Their guns reach farther than ours. Their supplies are endless, while ours dwindle. He paused, letting the truth settle, but they fight for orders, for pay. We fight for our children's breath, our ancestors' bones, our right to live as the Creator made us. This gives us strength they cannot understand. Debate raged for hours. Young warriors advocated for immediate attack, strike first, die with honor. Older heads counseled strategic retreat, save the people to fight another day. A few suggested negotiation, though everyone knew the time for words had passed. Finally, Chief Crowfeather called for my opinion. The lodge fell silent as I stood, feeling the weight of every eye. I've lived in both worlds now, I began slowly. I know white soldiers fight differently than warriors. They rely on supply, lines, communication, overwhelming force. Take away these advantages, and they become vulnerable. How? Red Horse demanded. Mobility, knowledge of the land, strike and fade. Make them chase shadows while their supplies dwindle and their horses founder. I drew patterns in the dirt floor, showing tactics I'd read about in military histories. They expect either full battle or full flight. Give them neither. Bleed them slowly. The strategy wasn't originally mine. Partisan fighters had used similar tactics throughout history, but applied to this landscape, with warriors who knew every hidden canyon and water source, it offered hope. After more debate, the council decided we would fight, but cleverly. The camp would split into smaller bands, harder to track and corner. Warriors would harass supply lines and scouting parties. The main force would remain mobile, drawing soldiers deeper into country that favored our knowledge over their numbers. As the council dispersed, Chief Crowfeather caught my arm. Your wedding to Samuel. It should happen tomorrow, before we scatter to the winds. I nodded, understanding. Joy seized where possible, because tomorrow promised nothing. The ceremony took place at dawn, as the first light painted the eastern mountains crimson. I wore the dress the women had helped create, white doeskin, adorned with intricate beadwork depicting stars and running horses. My hair was braided with eagle feathers and sweet grass. The bear claw necklace, my first connection to this world, lay against my heart. Samuel waited by the sacred fire, resplendent in his finest shirt and leggings, his face painted with symbols of protection and love. When our eyes met, the watching crowd faded away. There was only him, only this moment. We carved from uncertainty. Singing cedar performed the blessings, wrapping us in a buffalo robe that symbolized our new unity. As she sang the ancient words, I offered my own silent prayers to the God of my childhood, to the spirits of this land, to whatever powers might protect the love we'd found against all odds. when Samuel placed a necklace of elk teeth around my neck, a warrior's gift to his bride. I saw tears in his eyes. Neither of us spoke of why. We both knew this might be our only moment as husband and wife before war consumed everything. The celebration that followed mixed joy with desperation. People danced with fierce energy as if movement could hold back fate. Food appeared from carefully hoarded stores, a feast in the face of famine. Elderly storytellers shared tales of other dark times survived, other victories won against impossible odds. That night in the teepee we now shared as married couple, Samuel held me close as wind rattled the lodge poles. "I want you to know," he whispered, "that marrying you is the finest thing I've ever done. Whatever comes, I regret nothing." "Nor I replied, tracing the scar on his shoulder where my medicines had healed him months ago, though I do wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently that morning by the creek. Then I would have died alone, and you would have lived half a life among people who never truly saw you. The spirits knew what they were doing." Dawn brought the reality we'd temporarily held at bay. Scouts reported dust clouds to the east, cavalry columns advancing faster than expected. The camp exploded into organized chaos as families prepared to scatter according to plan. Samuel and I would ride with Chief Crowfeather's band, about 40 warriors and their families. My medical knowledge made me too valuable to risk with a smaller group. As we packed our few possessions, Maggie worked beside us, her usual sharp tongue silent. "Sister," I said finally, using the Lakota word. She looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Sister," she agreed, "whatever happens, you brought light to our family, to our people. Remember that." We embraced fiercely, knowing we might never meet again in this life. The scattering happened with heartbreaking efficiency. Bands peeled off in different directions, each taking assigned elderly and children. Some headed north toward Canada, others west into the mountains. Our group would swing south, then east, a dangerous gambit designed to draw soldiers away from the more vulnerable bands. As we rode out, I looked back at the abandoned camp. Lodge poles stood naked against the sky like skeletal fingers. The fire pits that had warmed us through winter lay cold and dead. By evening, wind would erase even our tracks, as if we'd never existed here at all. For 3 days, we moved like ghosts across the landscape. Samuel and the other scouts ranged far ahead and behind, watching for soldier sign. At night, we made cold camps, no fires to betray our position. Children learned to muffle their cries. Even the dogs seemed to understand the need for silence. On the 4th day, our gambit succeeded too well. Scouts reported a column of 200 cavalry had picked up our trail and was closing fast. We'd drawn them away from the other bands, but now we had to survive the attention we'd attracted. Chief Crowfeather made the hard choice. Warriors stay to slow them down. Families continue south to the broken lands beyond Redstone Creek. We'll rejoin you when we can. I started to protest. My place was with the wounded who would surely come, but Samuel cut me off. "You go with the families. Your skills will be needed either way." "Samuel, no arguments." His voice was firm, but his hand on my cheek was gentle. "Promise me you'll live. Whatever happens, live." "Only if you promise the same," he smiled sadly. I promised to try. Our parting was swift, a kiss that tasted of tears and promises, a final touch of hands. Then the warriors wheeled their horses north, while families continued south. I rode with the other women, my heart tearing in 2 directions. The battle, when it came, echoed across the prairie like thunder. We were 5 miles away, pushing exhausted horses through rough country, but the sound carried clear, rifles cracking, war cries rising, the scream of horses. Every woman's face went rigid with fear and pride mixed. I wanted to turn back, to use my medical skills where they were surely needed. but I had promises to keep and children to protect. We pushed on as the battle sounds faded behind us. We reached the relative safety of the broken lands by nightfall. This country was a maze of canyons and mesas, impossible for cavalry to navigate easily. As we made camp in a hidden valley, I set up what medical supplies I had, preparing for whatever news the night would bring. Wounded warriors began trickling in near midnight, first a few, then more. I worked mechanically, cleaning wounds, setting bones, trying not to look too closely at faces, afraid of what, of who I might not see. Then night wind rode in, Samuel's limp form draped across his horse. My world stopped. I ran to them, medical training overriding panic. Samuel was unconscious, his chest soaked with blood, still breathing but barely. Night wind helped me carry him to a sheltered spot where I could work. The wound was bad, saber cut across his ribs, deep but not immediately fatal if I could. Stop the bleeding and prevent infection. I worked with desperate efficiency, using everything Singing Cedar had taught me, combined with my white medical knowledge. Clean the wound, pack with herbs that fight infection, bind tightly but not so tight as to restrict breathing, elevate slightly to ease lung function. All the while I talked to him, nonsense words of love and encouragement, as if my voice could anchor his spirit to his body. The night stretched endless. I stayed beside him, monitoring his breathing, checking the bandages, dripping water between his cracked lips when he stirred. Around us, the camp settled into exhausted silence. We'd survived the day, but at what cost? Samuel woke near dawn, his eyes finding mine immediately. "You kept your promise," he whispered. "So did you, though you nearly broke it." I smoothed his hair back, feeling the fever that was beginning to build. "Lie still, you're hurt badly." The others? 15 wounded, 3 dead. But we drew the soldiers off. The other bands escaped safely. I helped him sip water. "Chief, Crowfeather says you fought like 10 men. I fought like a man with something to live for." He caught my hand. "Grace, if I don't, you will." I put all my conviction into the words. "You will heal, and we will survive this, and we will grow old together telling stories to our grandchildren. I won't accept any other outcome." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Stubborn woman. You married me. You knew what you were getting." The fever worsened over the next days. I fought it with every remedy I knew while the band moved deeper into the hidden canyons. Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for me, sometimes lost in delirious dreams. On the 3rd night, his fever broke. I wept with relief as his skin cooled and his breathing eased. When he woke clear-eyed the next morning, I finally allowed myself to believe he would live. Recovery was slow. While Samuel healed, news filtered in from other bands. The Army's summer campaign was faltering. Soldiers couldn't maintain supply lines in the harsh country. Horses died from bad water and poor grazing. Warriors struck at isolated patrols, then melted away like smoke. But we were losing too. Not just warriors in battle, but the slow bleeding of a people being squeezed from their land. Game grew scarce as hunting grounds shrank. Children went hungry. Elders spoke quietly of surrender, of accepting reservation life to save the young. By autumn, Samuel was strong enough to ride again. We moved constantly now, always one step ahead of Army patrols. I had become the band's primary healer, combining traditions to treat everything from battle wounds to childhood diseases. One crisp October morning, as I gathered healing herbs in a hidden valley, I realized I carried more than medical knowledge. My monthly flows had stopped. My belly showed the faintest rounding. New life grew within me. A child conceived in joy, carried through war, who would be born into an uncertain future. I told Samuel that night, as we lay beneath stars, sharp as blade points in the cold air. His hand moved wonderingly to my belly. "A child," he breathed. "Our child. Are you happy?" Happy? I'm terrified, overjoyed, humbled. He pulled me closer. How do we bring new life into this world when everything is ending? Nothing is ending, I said firmly. Changing, yes. But our people, both of them, the one I was born to and the one I chose, have survived conquest before. This child will bridge both worlds, belong to both, be stronger for it. Winter arrived early and harsh. We sheltered in a canyon system the army had yet to discover, but food ran dangerously low. Hunting parties returned empty-handed more often than not. The buffalo, once numbering in millions, had been systematically slaughtered to starve native peoples into submission. As my pregnancy advanced, I found myself thinking of Settlers' Ridge, not with longing that life felt like someone else's story now, but with strategic consideration. The town had supplies. More importantly, it had information about army movements. When I proposed infiltrating the town to gather intelligence and supplies, the council reacted with horror. Samuel most of all. Absolutely not, he said flatly. You're pregnant. You're known there as someone who lived with us. They'd arrest you immediately. They think I'm in St. Louis with relatives, I countered. Emma's letter confirmed that. Story, I could claim I escaped from captivity, that I've been trying to get back to civilization. They'd believe it. It's what they expect. The argument raged for days. In the end, necessity won. We needed information desperately. I was the only one who could get it. They gave me a stolen cavalry horse and the ragged remnants of a white woman's dress. I practiced my story until it felt real. Months of captivity, daring escape, desperate journey. The bruises and hardships of our nomadic life would support the tale. Leaving Samuel was agony. He held me for long minutes beside the horse, his face carved with fear. Come back to me, he said simply. Both of you. Always, I promised, touching my swollen belly. We have too much to live for. The ride to Settlers' Ridge took 2 days. As familiar landmarks appeared, I felt like a ghost returning to haunt its former life. The town looked exactly the same. False-fronted buildings, rutted Main Street, church steeple piercing the sky like an accusation. I rode in at dusk, slumping in the saddle, playing the part of exhausted escapee. People emerged from buildings, recognition dawning on their faces. Someone ran for Sheriff Pike. Dear God, Emma Hartley breathed, pushing through the crowd. Grace, is it really you? I let myself fall from the horse into her arms, sobbing with very real emotion, though. Not for the reasons they assumed. Emma, I escaped. Finally escaped. They carried me to Doc Sullivan's office. While he examined me with professional detachment, I spun my tale of captivity and flight. The story came easily. I simply inverted the truth, painting horror where I'd found humanity, brutality where I'd discovered love. Sheriff Pike took notes, his face grim. The savages who held you, can you lead us to their camp? They moved constantly, I lied. I was kept blindfolded during travels. I only escaped because a warrior took pity on me, left me near a trail. I touched my belly, because of my condition. The sheriff's expression softened. Those animals, did they... was it... I let him assume the worst, knowing his assumptions protected my child's true parentage. I don't want to speak of it, I whispered. Over the next days, I gathered information while playing the traumatized survivor. Army supply schedules, troop movements, strategic plans, all discussed freely around the poor rescued woman. I memorized everything. Emma proved my staunchest ally, though she didn't know it. She'd returned to town after her husband's death, reclaiming her store through sheer determination. At night, in her rooms above the shop, she spoke more freely. The whole thing's a disaster, she confided. The army's hemorrhaging money and men. Congress is asking questions. There's talk of negotiating, offering better reservation terms if the holdouts surrender by spring. What kind of terms? Permission to hunt buffalo off reservation, better rations, schools that teach both languages. She sighed. Of course, promises are easily broken once people are disarmed and confined. I stored this knowledge carefully. Hope and warning. Mixed. On my fourth night, as I prepared my escape, Harlan Cross appeared at Emma's door. He'd grown fat on war profits, selling supplies to the army at inflated prices. His pig eyes traveled over my body with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. "Grace," he said, hat in hand, but authority in his voice. "I've come to make an offer. I'm tired, Harlan. Perhaps tomorrow. You're widowed, ruined, carrying a half-breed bastard." His words were bullets. "No decent man will have you now. But I'm willing to overlook your unfortunate experiences. Marry me. I'll raise the child as my own, give you back your place in society." Rage rose in my throat like bile. This man who'd stolen my land, burned my barn, driven me into exile. Now, he wanted to own me completely. "That's generous," I managed. "I need time to consider. Consider quickly. My offer won't stand forever." He leaned closer, breath foul with whiskey and entitlement. "You need protection, Grace. The town's full of talk about white women who willingly consort with savages. Ugly talk." The threat was clear. Accept his proposal or face accusations of collaboration, perhaps even charges of treason. I forced myself to nod meekly. That night I slipped away like smoke. Emma had left. The back door unlocked, accidentally, she'd claim later. I took the cavalry horse and rode hard for the Badlands, carrying military intelligence that could save lives and news of possible negotiations that might offer hope. Samuel waited at the appointed rendezvous, his relief at seeing me so profound. He couldn't speak for long moments. As we rode back to the hidden camp, I shared everything I'd learned. Chief Crowfeather listened gravely to my report. "So we can bleed them through winter, but spring brings decision. Fight to the death or accept chains with promises they may not keep." "There's another option," I said slowly. "Some bands are already heading to Canada, the grandmother's country, where American soldiers can't follow. We could run forever." Red Horse interrupted. "Leave the bones of our ancestors. Let them win." "Let our children live," I countered. "Continue our ways in a new place rather than die in the old one." The debate continued for days. In the end, the band split. Some chose to continue the fight, hoping to win better terms through resistance. Others, including Samuel and myself, decided to attempt the dangerous journey north. Our group left during a blizzard that covered our tracks, but nearly killed us with cold. 20 families, including several elders and many children. Samuel led with other warriors, finding paths through country that seemed impassable. I rode. With the women, my pregnancy now advanced enough to make travel difficult. But I'd learned endurance these past months. When exhaustion threatened, I thought of the life growing inside me, this child who would know freedom, even if in exile. We crossed the medicine line into Canada as spring painted the prairies green. Behind us lay everything familiar: homeland, sacred sites, the graves of ancestors. Ahead waited uncertainty in a strange country with different rules. But we lived. We breathed free air. We spoke our language without fear. Our daughter was born in Saskatchewan during the moon of ripening berries. She emerged squalling and strong, with Samuel's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Sarah Singing Water, Sarah for my grandmother, Singing Water for the creek where her father and I first met. As I held her to my breast, surrounded by our adopted family in our new homeland, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. A cup of water offered in mercy had become a river of change, sweeping away everything I'd thought I knew about loyalty, love, and identity. Samuel sat beside us, his eyes soft with wonder as he watched our daughter nurse. "No regrets?" he asked, quietly, I thought of Settler's Ridge, of the life I might have lived, proper, predictable, half asleep. Then I looked at this man who'd taught me courage, at this child who embodied hope, at these people who'd shown me the true meaning of family. None, I said, and meant it completely. Only gratitude. Outside our lodge, children played in safety. Elders told stories without fear of soldiers breaking down doors. Warriors hunted freely across lands that, while not their ancestral home, at least offered dignity. We had lost much. The old ways were changing, perhaps dying. But here, in this moment, my husband's arm around me, our daughter at my breast, our people safe for now, I knew that sometimes the most profound victories come disguised as defeats. Love had conquered fear. Mercy had triumphed over hatred, and two peoples, through the bridge of our joined lives, had proven that understanding was possible even in the darkest times. As sunset painted the Saskatchewan sky in shades of rose and gold, I whispered a prayer of thanksgiving, for water freely given, for love unexpectedly found, for the courage to choose humanity over the safety of prejudice. Our story would not appear in history books. No monuments would mark our passing. But in the laughter of our children, in the bonds between peoples who'd learned to see each other truly, in the simple triumph of lives lived with integrity, there our legacy would endure. The bear claw necklace, worn smooth now by countless touchings, rested against my heart. Such a small thing to have changed so much, but then the greatest journeys often begin with the smallest steps. A cup of water, an act of mercy, a choice to see the human behind the label of enemy, and from such seeds, new worlds grow. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.